I remember the first time I held my grandchildren, even though I wasn't supposed to be their mother. The hospital nursery smelled faintly of antiseptic and baby powder, a mix that clung to my coat when I left. My daughter, Valerie, had vanished not long after giving birth to Arthur, Emily, and Andrea. She was young, scared, overwhelmed. I had been angry at first, yes, but mostly I had been terrified. Terrified for my grandchildren, abandoned before they could even know the warmth of a mother's arms. 13 years later, I still remember that fear, the way it had twisted in my chest, a cold knot I couldn't shake. Life has a way of forcing you into impossible decisions. I didn't plan to become a mother again. I didn't plan to raise children that weren't mine by law, though in every other way they were mine by heart. But when you see little eyes searching for comfort, little hands curling into yours for reassurance, you don't think about legality, you think about safety. And so, I became their home, their protector, their constant. Arthur's stubbornness reminded me of Valerie at that age, Emily's curiosity made me laugh, and Andrea's quiet observation kept me on my toes. They grew up under my watchful eye, through scraped knees, broken hearts, and sleepless nights filled with nightmares. I never once counted the cost. Love, after all, isn't transactional. Then the messages began. A week ago, my phone vibrated with a name I hadn't expected to see again. Valerie. My hands shook as I opened them. At first, I thought perhaps she had come back for the right reasons, to apologize, to try to rebuild. But the words were sharp, calculating, demanding. She threatened legal action, hinted at inheritance, suggested that if I resisted, I could face consequences. Every line was a reminder that 13 years of absence had not softened her desire to take what she considered hers. I sat at the kitchen table long into the night, staring at the messages as if they might rearrange themselves into something kinder. They didn't. I could feel the air in the room thicken, the scent of my coffee growing bitter as my thoughts turned. She wasn't returning for love, not really. She was returning for what she had left behind, and she had the audacity to frame it as concern. My heart ached, but I knew what I had to do. Protection comes first. Always. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale paper, the tension pressing down on everyone like a heavy quilt. I clutched my purse against my chest, a shield more symbolic than practical, as Valerie's lawyer tried to interrupt, tried to soften her transgressions with excuses and psychiatric reports. But the documents spoke for themselves, the renunciation she had written in her own hand, her absence, the messages she had sent, each one an undeniable testament to her intentions. I felt a strange combination of sorrow and determination. I was sad for the girl. She had been trapped in fear and desperation, but I was resolute in protecting the children I had raised. Valerie's eyes met mine once, a flicker of recognition, maybe even shame, before she turned away. I didn't look at her again. My focus was on the grandchildren seated nearby, their hands barely touching, clinging together quietly. I wanted them to know, in that moment, that I would never abandon them. The judge asked me to speak, and I did, my voice calm, deliberate, unwavering. I told the truth, that Valerie had chosen absence over love, that I had chosen presence over comfort, and that the children's welfare would not be compromised for greed or convenience. When the verdict was read, confirming my permanent guardianship and issuing a 5-year restraining order, the weight lifted slightly from my shoulders, but it didn't disappear. There was no celebration, only relief that justice measured, deliberate, and protective had been done. My grandchildren wrapped their small arms around me in silent embrace, and I realized with quiet satisfaction that the years of sacrifice had been worth every sleepless night, every heartbreak, every tear shed for them. Yet, life has a strange way of balancing consequences. Weeks later, I learned that Valerie's world had crumbled. Her partner had left her, taking her youngest son, and she was struggling to survive in a small, dimly lit apartment. Despite all she had done to me, I couldn't ignore her suffering. One evening, I packed bags of groceries, rice, beans, vegetables, chicken, and delivered them quietly to her door. She looked up at me, surprised, broken, and ashamed. I didn't scold. I didn't lecture. I simply set the bags down and said, "You're my daughter." No matter what. Her tears filled the room, mixing sorrow and guilt into a heavy cloud. She whispered apologies that I didn't need to hear aloud. I could see them written in every shiver of her shoulders, every bowed gaze. She had to face the consequences of her choices. She had to learn for herself the hard lessons of responsibility and love. Change cannot be forced. It must come from within. I left her then quietly, knowing I had done the right thing, helping without surrendering what my grandchildren deserved. Back home, life returned to a steady rhythm. Arthur excelled at college, Emily thrived in her scholarship studies, and Andrea's music filled the rooms with light and laughter. They grew, not under fear, but under love, stability, and protection. And I watched each day, grateful for the chance to nurture, guide, and safeguard them. I realized more than ever that true love sets boundaries. It protects. It does not negotiate. And in protecting them, I had also protected myself from the pain of betrayal repeating itself. The morning of the trial arrived like a storm breaking over calm waters. I woke before dawn, as I always did, listening to the quiet breathing of Arthur, Emily, and Andrea, still asleep in their rooms. The house smelled faintly of bread baking, a comfort I'd allowed myself in the few hours before facing what felt like a reckoning. I sipped my coffee slowly, feeling the warmth seep into my hands and my chest, grounding me. Today wasn't about anger or revenge. Today was about truth. Valerie arrived with her lawyer, Mark Sullivan, looking more fragile than I expected. Her posture was slumped, her eyes darting as if the courtroom were full of predators. I could see the flicker of fear, the same fear I had once seen in her own eyes when she was a young mother, but now mingled with something else: desperation. She didn't come for her children. She came for control, for money, for the inheritance that had been carefully secured for the 3 lives she had abandoned. The judge, Theodore Mason, was stern and attentive. His presence filled the room with authority, yet it wasn't intimidating, it was fair. I presented the evidence calmly, deliberately. The renunciation of parental rights she had signed in 2011, the text messages in which she threatened me with legal consequences, the meticulous record of her absence from her children's lives. Each document, each message, each date told a story. It wasn't one of love returning, it was one of greed masked as maternal instinct. "Mrs. Vance," the judge asked, placing the text messages in front of her, "do you confirm that you sent these messages?" Her lips trembled. Tears welled in her eyes, but no sound came. I could feel the courtroom hold its breath, the silence pressing in. I had expected anger, perhaps, from the other side, but instead there was only the quiet truth. I spoke softly, addressing the room, but my eyes were on her. "I'm not seeking revenge," I said. "I understand that Valerie faced challenges, that early motherhood and mental health struggles can drive impossible decisions. But I cannot accept that after 13 years of absence, after formally relinquishing her rights, after creating a new life and family, she returns only because money is involved," she sobbed, her lawyer looking helpless. "Your Honor," I continued, my voice calm but firm, "I request that my permanent legal guardianship over my grandchildren be confirmed. I request that my daughter's custody claims be rejected in full, and that a restraining order be issued to prevent any unsupervised contact unless the children, upon reaching legal age, choose to establish a relationship." Valerie's protest was immediate, loud, raw. "You can't take my children away from me forever," she shouted, the courtroom reverberating with her desperation. I looked at her not with cruelty, but with the weight of years, sacrifice, and love. "Daughter, you gave them up 13 years ago. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm protecting what you abandoned." Andrea, Emily, and Arthur sat silently, their small hands clasped together, absorbing the gravity of the moment. I saw in their eyes a mixture of hurt and loyalty, confusion and understanding. They had never needed her presence to feel love. They had found it in me, in each other, and in the stability we had built together. During a recess, Valerie approached me, hesitant, trembling. "Mom, can we talk privately?" Her voice broke, reminiscent of the little girl who had once needed me. I measured her carefully. "Have you changed, Valerie, or are you here just for the money?" I asked, straightforward, because after 13 years, I had earned the right to brutal honesty. Her gaze dropped. "Both," she whispered. "I need the money, but I've missed them all these years." "Missed them?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You had 13 years to call, to write, to ask. 13 years to show love. And now, suddenly, you have courage?" She swayed, leaning against the wall as if physically supporting herself against the weight of her confession. "Javier, he said if I didn't get custody and the inheritance, he'd leave me. I couldn't. I had nothing else." For a moment, I saw the scared girl she had been, the one who ran, terrified and overwhelmed. And for a fraction of a second, I felt compassion. But that moment was fleeting. Then you haven't changed, I said softly but firmly. 13 years ago, you made a choice based on fear and convenience. Today, you are making a choice for the same reason. Her voice rose, defensive, desperate, but I remained calm. Valerie, your children deserved unconditional love. You had the capacity, as you have now shown with Paul, but you chose to give it only when it was convenient. My grandchildren grew under love. You refused to provide. That love wasn't transactional, and it never will be. She collapsed in a chair, sobbing, and for the first time in years, I felt a pang of pity mingled with resolute strength. Pity, yes, but no compromise. The courtroom resumed, the judge reviewing every document, meticulously asking pointed questions. Her inability to answer with honesty, the contrast between her treatment of Paul and her abandonment of the 3 older children, and the undeniable text threats, all weighed heavily in the room. Mrs. Vance, the judge said finally, in light of the evidence, this court finds in favor of Eleanor Vance. Permanent guardianship is confirmed. Custody claims are denied. A 5-year restraining order is established. The air seemed to shift, lighter somehow, though my chest still ached. Valerie sobbed uncontrollably. The children, however, looked at me with quiet relief. They knew, without my saying it aloud, that they were safe, that the woman who had chosen love over convenience had shielded them from betrayal once more. After the trial, the house felt different. The tension that had lingered for weeks, the fear that someone could come and take my grandchildren away was gone. Arthur, Emily, and Andrea moved through the rooms with a quiet confidence, no longer glancing at the door with suspicion or holding their meals close like treasures. The legal battle was over, and justice had been served, but the weight of what had transpired still rested on my shoulders. I couldn't stop thinking about Valerie. Despite everything, she was my daughter. That thought alone was enough to stir conflicting emotions: rage, sorrow, pity, and a strange, persistent affection. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine. Schoolwork, extracurriculars, and the small but necessary household errands kept me busy, but my mind wandered constantly to the woman who had abandoned us all for so many years. Then came the news from Alma, my neighbor and friend, whose brother happened to be the judge. She arrived one afternoon, balancing a tray of tamales in one hand, a knowing expression on her face. Eleanor, she said softly, I need to tell you something about Valerie. I set the children's homework aside, sensing the gravity in her voice. What is it, Elma? She's asking about you. About the children, Elma said cautiously. She hasn't violated the restraining order, but she's been inquiring through neighbors, trying to see how they're doing, if they need anything. My stomach twisted. I had expected relief after the court's decision, but now a new fear surfaced. Was she planning to challenge the order? Was she preparing another attempt at manipulation? Do you think she's planning something? I asked, my voice low. I don't know, Alma admitted. I just thought you should know in case. That night, I stayed awake long after Andrea had gone to bed, thinking about Valerie. I pictured her alone in that small, rundown apartment. No Javier, no Paul, no steady income. Just her regrets, and the weight of the choices she had made. My heart ached for her, even as my mind warned me not to compromise the safety and stability of my grandchildren. By morning, a decision had formed in my heart. I couldn't abandon her to suffer alone, not completely. I packed a week's worth of groceries: rice, beans, vegetables, chicken, milk, and bread. I drove to the address Alma had given me, climbing the narrow, creaking stairs until I reached the 3rd floor. My heart pounded in my chest as I knocked on the door of apartment 3B. A hesitant voice called, "Who is it?" "It's me, your mom," I said softly. There was a long pause. Then the sound of bolts sliding open. The door creaked, revealing Valerie. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her clothes were clean but worn, and her face carried the weight of sleepless nights and missed years. Her eyes widened as she recognized me. What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I brought you some things," I replied, lifting the bags. "May I come in?" She stepped aside, and I entered her tiny apartment. It was simple, tidy in its own way, but cluttered with unpaid bills stacked neatly on the kitchen table. Her life had unraveled, and the consequences of her choices lay bare in front of me. "Why?" she asked again, her voice cracking. "Because you're my daughter," I said simply. Because no matter what happened, I can't let you go hungry. She sank onto the old sofa, burying her face in her hands and sobbing. I've lost everything. Javier left. Paul is gone. I ruined everything. I was stupid. I didn't know what to do. I've lost my first children, the inheritance, my home. I sat beside her. Valerie, you didn't lose your first children. You abandoned them. There's a difference. She looked at me, eyes swollen, shimmering with tears. You always remind me of my mistakes, she whispered. I don't remind you, I replied. I don't allow you to rewrite history. If you want to change, you need to face the truth. You abandoned 3 beautiful children because it was easier than being present. You only came back when it was convenient for you, when there was something to gain. Her sobs shook the apartment. I live with that guilt every day, she admitted. Guilt doesn't help, Valerie, I said softly. It's just disguised self-pity. What helps is genuine repentance, choosing to change, taking responsibility for your life without expecting anyone else to save you. She was silent, letting the words settle. After a long moment, she asked hesitantly, is there any way I can ever see my children again? Maybe, I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. But it will only happen on their terms if they're ever ready. Right now, you need to focus on becoming the person they or anyone could trust and respect. Get psychological help, find a steady job, learn to live independently without depending on someone else, and prove that you've truly changed. I stood, preparing to leave. The groceries will last you a week. After that, it's up to you to manage your life. Her small voice stopped me. Will you come back? I don't know, Valerie, I replied honestly. It depends on you, on what you do from now on. I can't rescue you. You have to save yourself. As I drove home, a strange peace settled over me. I hadn't compromised my grandchildren's safety, and I hadn't abandoned compassion. Sometimes love meant holding firm boundaries and letting natural consequences play out. When I arrived, Arthur was at the kitchen table studying. Grandma, where were you? He asked, concerned. I went to see your biological mom, I said truthfully. His expression darkened immediately. Grandma, you're not going to let her back into our lives, are you? He asked, his voice edged with worry. No, my love, I reassured him. But we can feel compassion for someone without letting them hurt us or you again. He nodded slowly, accepting my words. Do you think she'll ever really change? I don't know, I said honestly. But if she does, it will be because she chooses to, not because anyone forces her. That's the only kind of change that matters. Months passed, and life gradually settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. The shadow of Valerie's return had faded, replaced by quiet mornings filled with breakfast smells, laughter over homework struggles, and the occasional clatter of Andrea practicing her guitar. The court's decision gave us peace, but it was the daily routines, the small victories of normal life that reminded me we had survived, and even thrived, despite everything. Arthur excelled at college, earning a scholarship and thriving in his engineering courses. Emily, ever the diligent student, balanced her part-time work at the bookstore with high school honors classes, slowly preparing to leave for college. Andrea, still in high school, threw herself into her music, leading her school band with the same determination that had always made me proud. Each of them carried themselves with a quiet confidence that could only have come from years of stability, love, and protection. And through it all, I remained the constant anchor, the grandmother, the protector, the one who never abandoned them. Then came news that softened even the hardest edges of my heart. Elma arrived one afternoon, a bright smile behind her maternal warmth. Eleanor, she said softly, I have news about Valerie. I paused mid-task, curious but wary. What about her? She's taking responsibility for her life. She enrolled in psychological therapy and has been attending sessions consistently for 6 months. She's paying for it herself with her cleaning job, and she's found a day job at a medical clinic as a receptionist. She's stabilizing her life, Elma explained. A strange swell of pride mixed with relief filled me. For the first time in years, I felt genuine hope for her, though carefully tempered. She was taking steps slowly to change, not for me, not for the children, but for herself. And that was the only kind of change that could ever matter. She hasn't asked about the children? I asked cautiously. No, she knows you've already done enough for her. She told Theodore it's her turn to prove she can change without anyone else's help, Elma replied. The simplicity of that statement struck me. Valerie was finally learning the hard lessons of accountability, the idea that redemption couldn't be demanded or rushed, that love and trust must be earned through consistent actions over time. That evening, as Andrea returned from school, she looked thoughtful. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course, my love," I said, setting aside the vegetables I was chopping. "Do you think I'll ever want to meet my biological mom?" she asked quietly, eyes wide with honesty. I paused. I had long expected this question, knowing it would come someday. "I don't know, Andrea. That decision will be yours, whenever you're ready. If you choose to meet her, that's your choice. If you decide never to, that's also your right. Either way, I'll support you." Andrea's brow furrowed slightly. "I wouldn't be upset if I met her." "No, my love," I said softly. "I'd be proud of you for making your own decision. What matters is that you act responsibly and with understanding, not pressure or obligation." That night, I sat quietly on the porch, the cool autumn air brushing my cheeks. For years, I had carried resentment toward Valerie. Resentment for leaving me with responsibilities I hadn't asked for. Resentment for abandoning her children. Resentment for returning only when money became a factor. But slowly, as the months passed, I realized that resentment had been a chain, one that bound me as tightly as it did her. Letting it go didn't excuse her, but it freed me. It allowed me to move forward without bitterness, to focus on the thriving lives of my grandchildren rather than the mistakes of their mother. Weeks later, Emily turned 19. During her small celebration, she took my hands and looked into my eyes. "Grandma," she said, voice trembling slightly, "thank you. Not just for saving us, but for teaching us that true love doesn't abandon. That even when life is hard, love can remain steadfast." I felt a lump in my throat and hugged her tightly. It was the affirmation I had longed for, the understanding that the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the quiet tears, and the unwavering care had mattered. Arthur, having just turned 21, gained full access to his inheritance. He approached me with a small envelope, his expression serious but tender. "Grandma, this is for everything you've spent on us all these years," he said. "You earned this, more than anyone." I accepted it, not out of necessity, but because it represented acknowledgement of years of dedication, love, and sacrifice. More importantly, it was a lesson for them about gratitude, respect, and giving back, not obligation, but love expressed through action. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if Valerie had returned for the right reasons. If she had come asking for forgiveness, not custody. If she had sought to repair the bond she had broken rather than claim what she felt entitled to. Perhaps we could have built a new kind of family, a healthier, extended network of love. Perhaps my grandchildren could have met their biological mother under safe, loving circumstances. But life isn't about maybes. Life is about the choices we make with the information we have at the moment. And in that moment, I chose to protect 3 children, to love them unconditionally, to fight fiercely for their well-being, and to shield them from harm. Valerie, on the other hand, is now learning the natural consequences of her actions. Her life, unraveled by her own decisions, is slowly being rebuilt through effort, humility, and reflection. She has begun the process of growth, but it is hers alone, and any future reconciliation with the children must be earned on their terms. As I watch Andrea practice guitar, Emily review her college notes, and Arthur plan his career path, I feel a quiet pride. These are children who have flourished under the shelter of love, stability, and firm boundaries. They are empathetic, responsible, hardworking, and resilient. I don't hate Valerie, but I don't excuse her either. I understand the overwhelming challenges of motherhood, the fear, the mistakes, and the human fragility that can lead to abandonment. But I also understand that choices have lasting consequences. And for 13 years, I chose love over comfort, presence over resentment, sacrifice over selfishness. That love created lives. That love nurtured resilience. That love established a safe, thriving environment that no legal document or biological connection could replace. And perhaps that is the true lesson of it all. That love, uncompromising yet compassionate, can coexist with firm boundaries. That forgiveness does not mean accepting harm, and compassion does not require compromising safety. That justice is not always punishment, it is allowing the natural consequences of choices to play out while holding steadfast to one's own moral compass. Through every struggle, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt, I've come to understand one truth. Love is enduring, selfless, and unwavering. It does not abandon, negotiate, or demand reward. It simply exists, constant as the dawn, strong as the roots of an old tree, silent yet persistent, shaping the lives it touches. And for my grandchildren, that love will always be home. As I sit here in the quiet of my home listening to the soft hum of life around me, the distant chatter of Andrea practicing her guitar, Emily's faint footsteps as she returns books to her shelf, Arthur's careful typing on his laptop, I can't help but reflect on everything that has happened. 13 years ago, I never imagined I would be raising 3 children who weren't mine by blood, navigating a life filled with legal battles, sleepless nights, and constant worry. And yet, here we are, thriving, resilient, and stronger for the journey. I've learned that love is not always the grand gestures we see in stories. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments, packing lunch for a child who is too tired to make it themselves, staying up late to soothe a nightmare, holding boundaries firm while keeping a heart open. It's in the choices we make when no one is watching, when no one will give thanks, and when the easy path is to walk away. Valerie's story is a reminder that change comes from within. True repentance, genuine growth, they cannot be demanded, forced, or rushed. They are earned through effort, humility, and responsibility. I cannot control her, just as I cannot control the past. But I can guide my grandchildren, protect them, and teach them that love, justice, and compassion can exist together even in the hardest of circumstances. To everyone watching this story, I hope it reminds you that family is more than biology, that forgiveness does not require excusing harm, and that sometimes the strongest love is the one that protects, even from those we care about. Life will test you in ways you cannot predict, but the choices you make in those moments define who you are and the legacy you leave behind. So I ask you, have you ever had to protect someone you loved from someone else they also loved? How did you navigate the balance between compassion and self-preservation? And if you've ever felt resentment, what did it take for you to let it go? These are the questions I leave with you because in the end, love is measured not by perfection, but by resilience, understanding, and the courage to act with integrity even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening to our story. If it touched your heart, share it, comment below, and remember, love doesn't abandon, it persists, silently and steadfastly, shaping lives in ways only time can reveal.